It is just an opening bid. And if the opening bid involves modest concessions, a ladder for Putin to climb down, and on the NATO, on the European, on the American side, really cast iron security guarantees to Ukraine, I think that's something in the end the Ukrainians ought to accept. But in the meantime, obviously, we must all protest that this opening bid is absolutely outrageous, and it is absolutely outrageous.
No, I want to start by talking about Ukraine and what's going on there. Secret peace proposals have apparently been drawn up by the US and Russia, and they have been leaked. These plans would see Ukraine forced to surrender the Donbass region, half its military, give up all its long-range missiles, and be forced to make Russian an official state language. Another worrying sign for Ukraine here is that General Keith Kellogg has announced his intention to step down as Trump's special envoy. Matthew, this sounds an awful lot like a plan designed to give Russia pretty much everything it wants and designed to give Ukraine almost nothing at all.
Yes, it does. It's a leak, and no doubt intentional. It's probably an opening bid rather than what either side think they could settle for. But it is still very, very worrying. And the trouble is, I am in an ambivalent position in that I'm quite sure that we must help Ukraine defend itself, and we must help Ukraine come to a peaceful solution where they remain independent as they are, and they can join NATO possibly, or the European Union. But I do think in the end there'll have to be a deal, and it will have to involve land. And I think President Zelensky must in the end come to that conclusion. If this is just part of a bargaining process which ends up with, say, Crimea going back to Russia and everything else staying the same, fine. But if this is really what Donald Trump is prepared to entertain, that's very worrying.
Sarah, what do you think? I mean, because it does look a bit like, it's the screws tightening on Ukraine and nobody really seems to have their back.
I mean, this is a prospectus for, Russian possession of Ukraine in totality. The idea that Ukraine should halve its army when it has already been fighting at a severe disadvantage against Russia. I mean, all that means is that 10 years from now, Ukraine will simply be a province of Russia. And I don't really see how you could interpret it in any other way. I do think Matthew is right that, given where things are, the deal that eventually comes is going to involve Ukraine surrendering some of the territory that Russia has taken during this invasion. And I think that's wrong. I don't really see how there's any way to rewind to get back to that point, because the foundational mistake is that Europe has been absolutely pathetic in terms of anticipating the threat that Russia represents. And it is really, really troubling that even at this point, we are still kind of faffing around in terms of, Europe as an entirety, acting as though Russia isn't a large and active threat to European borders, because it is, it is expansionist, historically expansionist in its current political ambitions, and it will simply keep coming. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of sense of will or organization to beef up military to the point that Europe can be protected.
I mean, Sarah's right, Matthew, that if there is a peace made in Ukraine, imposed upon Ukraine, that gives Russia an awful lot of what it wants, including territory, one would presume, looking at this plan anyway, would go further than the territory that Russia was merely occupying before the war, properly escalated 3 years ago now. That's a generational humiliation for Europe. That's a generational declaration that Europe is not a major power, will never be a major power, is the plaything of Russia and the United States, and needs to do what it's told.
Yes, Sarah's right on that. But I think this is not the shape of a final deal. It is just an opening bid. And if the opening bid involves modest concessions, a ladder for Putin to climb down, and on the NATO, on the European, on the American side, really cast iron security guarantees to Ukraine, I think that's something in the end the Ukrainians ought to accept. But in the meantime, obviously, we must all protest that this opening bid is absolutely outrageous, and it is absolutely outrageous.
I mean, if indeed it is an opening bid. What did you make, Sarah, of the story we saw yesterday when John Healey revealed that there's a Russian spy ship lurking off our coast that has also been trying to blind RAF pilots with lasers and stuff like that? What do we think about just there being Russian ships sailing into our waters apparently with impunity?
I mean, it's horrifyingly inevitable, isn't it? And again, I just keep coming back to the fact that we haven't invested in our armed forces at all. We have made so little effort to keep pace, both in terms of numbers and in terms of dealing with the kind of technological threats that are coming our way now. Feels hopelessly outdated. And, among the many things that this government is getting wrong, a complete failure to look at the needs of the military and to look at how we could actually be protecting this country. It seems one of the biggest derelictions that is there. It's just, currently it's not particularly politically relevant, but as Russia makes more of these incursions, and it will, because, that's Russia, this kind of peacocking is very much to Russia's advantage. They want people to know, they want Russians to know that Russia is out there, nibbling away at the edges, and they want the rest of Europe to know that they're not actually going to play by the rules as expected. And they don't feel any pressure or compunction about that at all. So this will keep on happening, and it's going to take a huge amount of political will to be ready to deal with it, and we're not even, a tenth of the way there yet.
Matthew, however ready we are, however powerful our military are, in this circumstance, we're not going to sink a Russian ship off our coast, are we?
Well, there is a problem with the sea. The high seas, we can't sink ships. We have the freedom of the high seas. It's quite an important navigational principle. And so long as they're not within our territorial waters, there's not much we can do. If they come into our territorial waters, we can order them to leave, and if they don't leave, we can sink them. And sooner or later, someone is going to sink a Russian ship, and it'll be a very good thing.
President, is it time for Congress to move legislation that puts pressure on Russia and puts pressure on Putin?
Well, I hear they're doing that, and that's okay with me. They're passing legislation, or the Republicans are putting in legislation that very tough. It's sanctioning, et cetera, on any country doing business with Russia. They may add Iran to that, as you know. I suggested it. So any country that does business with Russia will be very severely sanctioned. We may add Iran to the formula. Yeah.